The Center for Automotive Research estimated it would cost automakers $3.8 billion over the next 7 years to make it so AM radio would work in electric vehicles. In response, Congress is working on the AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act, which, and I quote, requires all new motor vehicles to have devices that can access AM broadcast stations installed as standard equipment. One of the main reasons for the rule was national EAS alerts, a topic we covered last year. This legislation is making waves across the radio and automotive industries, and it looks like everyone's gone to battle stations. The Consumer Technology Association, or CTA, which I really only know from CES, said only 1% of Americans last year heard the EAS alert on AM radio. That's around 1 million people, but hundreds of millions of people heard it on their cell phones. Now, I heard it on my phone while I was at VidSummit, and I didn't see anyone there with an AM radio, or FM for that matter. My dad heard it on AM, but well, he's a radio engineer, so he kinda had to. But I have questions, like that survey was done by the CTA, and it was an online survey. Could there be some bias against AM listeners, considering a lot of them might not be terminally online like we are? Then, when I heard it would cost billions of dollars to solve interference problems in EVs, I'm thinking like, is this fusion-level research? I mean, I thought AM radio was easy, but is it like NASA, like the engineers who discovered AM radio back then are dying off and the knowledge of how to design electronics without spurious emissions is dying off with them? Dad, you're a radio engineer and you do AM radio. Do you really think it'll cost billions of dollars to keep AM radio working in cars? I mean, my car from way back in 2007 has AM radio. Why can't they just use that old tech in new cars?
Yeah, it's certainly not the radio piece that costs the money. It would be them fixing things that are causing interference to AM, which I would remind everybody that's supposed to be protected anyway. We're supposed to not interfere with existing AM and FM radio service. So are they saying that they need all this money to fix the problems that they created that are already protected and should be fixed anyway? Or are they saying that somehow they have to develop a new AM radio? And I don't think they have to develop a new AM radio.
Yeah, because like this is not radical new technology. This is a new radio, but it's not different than the one 40 years ago.
You can receive it on a hot dog, for goodness sakes.
So we should probably just stick hot dogs in all the cars.
That's right.
And they would cook and also give you nice radio. So another question I have is, it seems like, you know, the CTA has their thing, but who's actually driving the legislation? Is it like AM station owners? Is it radio engineers like you? Or who's pushing it and why?
Yeah, well, you know, having watched the radio side of it, I think the radio side, we're going along, but it doesn't feel like we're the ones actually pushing it. Every interest group has their yes or no on it, and I think if you're heavy with car manufacturers, you're going to be on the other side. If you're with broadcast, you're going to be on the side of the mandate. But I think a lot of it has to do, and this is the tough part, I almost have to have three hats. You know, it's like I'm Joe Geerling, the consumer and taxpayer, and I'm Joe Geerling, the radio guy, and then I'm Joe Geerling, the radio guy who's been in a lot of meetings about safety and security of the nation, right? So as the consumer, it doesn't look like it's going to cost any money to me, except maybe a higher cost of a car for a little bit, but I don't know that that would be real. As a radio guy, I would like AM radios to be validated in service because there are millions and millions of people who use AM, and there's issues about getting out to people who aren't in our mega cities.
But there's only like 1 million people. That's what the CTA says. Only 1 million people got that alert, so nobody listens to AM radio.
I would question their data, but I mean, truthfully, you look at it, the whole point of getting the emergency alerts out is to hit 90-something% of the population immediately, right? So a lot of them are going to have cell phones. Some are going to be in their cars. Some people have their cell phones in the house and they're out gardening with the radio going. It's not about an either or. It's like, what do you do to hit your goal? It looks like, you know, the federal government emergency system world is sitting there saying, this has been an integral part of reaching the public. So if I put that hat on about disasters and things like that, we don't have a great replacement because anything dependent on the internet, as we know, areas can be wiped out of the internet. How else can you get it out? What else does the government have up their sleeve? And it's like the AM radio distribution system is massively covers, you know, the United States the way it is, and they only fail is if there are no longer AM radios accessible to people.
And I'm thinking if there's a nuke or an EMP in St. Louis, this place is shot. All my digital equipment, all my video recording, everything's going to be gone. But this radio, you know, it's not plugged in, it would probably still be working. If not, I could just go over there, grab some wire, thread it around something, and build a little receiver.
Right.
That leads up, like, is it necessary to have it in cars? Because I can buy this radio and have it sitting there, or weather radio or whatever, but is it necessary to have it in everybody's cars because they'll be driving around, or is that a step too far for mandating?
Yeah, well, I mean, that is the question where my three Joe Geerlings would all answer maybe differently, but I think having AM radio, the cars people do spend a significant amount of time in cars, and when they're in cars, there's a significant amount of radio listening, as opposed to, you can't scroll through YouTube and watch Geerling engineering videos. The whole thing of getting along with the emergency alerts in a timely manner, it's like when you're driving in your car and you're listening to the radio and there's a tornado ahead, when do you want to find out about that at night? It's hard to see and so forth. So that all the people who strategize, all of that kind of thing, it makes sense to them that it's not hard to have AM radios in cars. We've done it for the whole career. Some EVs have AM radios that work in them.
That seems impossible. If it's going to cost, somebody said it was going to cost $50 to $80 in materials per car to make this happen. But you're saying there are EVs out there that have it.
Yeah.
Are they just like really terrible? Like they added tons of extra equipment to it?
I'll tell you what. It's not a rocket science in a way that if say you're an EV car, it's something in the EV charging system or the motors at the wheel, something is putting out this to cause it even to be a problem, right? So to attack that problem, if you have to design a new motor and then build it in all your cars, I could see that costing a bit of money, but maybe you should have done that in the first place when you tested it and found out it interfered with a legally licensed FCC AM radio band.
There was a good quote or joke that I heard one time that digital engineers become analog engineers once they design their first circuit, and then they realize that they just built a really good transmitter.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm thinking like, as somebody who designs things for the web or works on electronics, I want to make the best design possible. And it sounds like in some ways the automakers are more saying like, we don't want to have to deal with interference. Does that have any effect on anything besides AM radio? Like, is it okay to just burn up all of our frequencies?
The thing is, if they can't keep AM radio clean, which is a band they should have been from the beginning of their design, if they can't do that, what else is floating around in that car that is not in the AM band but happens to be in another band that could cause some kind of issue with other devices? I mean, I think especially like medical devices, things like that. So that's where you question, like, okay, what else are you putting out there that we haven't checked?
Yeah.
So
if there is a standard and they're not meeting it right now, and they're saying it's going to cost billions to meet it.
Yeah, and we don't even know that, right? We don't know that they're not meeting it.
Yeah.
They're just telling us that AM radio in their cars is hard, which makes me think that they have an excessive amount of AM interference being generated by the car. So
yeah, and we can demonstrate that on this radio too. Maybe we'll insert a clip of us walking around the office.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
All right, AM radio, tuned into CamWax. The antenna in here is directional. You can see. So you want to find the direction that CamWax would be oriented to. And then if you walk around a room, right, so you're going to try to find, like, is there any
And of course it's talking about TikTok right now.
Yeah, so you can see picking up interference. Oh, did I knock it off? No, didn't knock it off. Look at that.
Maybe my third reality power meter is
So you want to unplug it?
Yeah.
Because this is how we test it.
Yeah.
Plug it in.
Wow.
Gone.
Antitrust law that's being broken.
I don't know, but TikTok, I guarantee you, is overvalued.
I think it's this.
Yeah, Canon. It has Wi-Fi.
Wow, which is it?
Could also be this charger.
Yeah, I know, that's what I mean. It could be. Choose your location wisely. That radio goes right there, Jeff.
Nope.
Oh, maybe not.
Real estate experts can do that for you. Here's a problem that many home
There's all kinds of stuff plugged in underneath the desk.
Where will they move? Plus, they need the funds from their current home.
Is your camera on still?
No, it's in my hands, literally right here. This is the camera.
A home seller goes through and provides a guaranteed
Good.
solution. If you need the cash from your current
You're catching
home to
that
buy
whatever's
the
over
next
there
home,
again.
Here's my recommendation. Call the agent I trust, Gloria
camera's
Liu,
not
and
so
ask her
happy
about
either.
her sell and stay program.
Well, and remember, you can
Call
put out
325
interference. It has to be limited to
314
so many
325
milliwatts, microwatts, whatever
Yeah.
the FCC rule is.
gloriahassebuyers.com.
But these are sample,
Visit
just
the
get your
Gloria
radios
Seller
away
Program
from
at the possession
devices. Or turn off breakers. That's another tip. Turn off breakers till you find the one that causes the worst interference, and then figure out what's on that breaker.
Yep.
So, yep.
Because it's not just cars. I've had so many little USB chargers or little power supplies
Yeah.
where obviously, especially on Amazon, if you buy them from AliExpress or something, they're not going through the FCC process and they're
Well,
not
they're
being
supposed
tested.
to.
Well,
Chargers, batteries, like you say, they get an approval and then they build it and sell 1 million of them that they manufacture. We've seen many things, even like clock radios, if you could imagine, that can hardly receive AM because of their design. But routers, TVs, all that stuff over time has been, I've seen TVs wipe out a whole household of radios for AM. And that's a bad deal, and they should get reported, and the FCC should crack down and do whatever they do. I don't know what they even do. I've never heard of anyone taking a product off the market
Yeah.
because the FCC told them they couldn't sell it anymore, but hopefully that's happened.
People have also had a pretty strong response to this online, but one comment in particular caught my eye. Mo Finn Wiley, I think on Ars Technica, said, AM is critical and FEMA is fighting for it for a reason. Do you have anything to say about that? Like we talked about the iPause system and
Right,
FEMA and all
right.
that with
Yeah.
KMOX.
So FEMA, I would say this. It's obvious that FEMA has invested using AM radio stations as a national alerting system in the case of certain types of disasters. And, they like to go 1, 2, 3, 4 deep. Like it's how deep do you go? If the person is not listening to a radio and they have their cell phone, if they don't have a cell phone but they're listening to the radio, do you send out sirens like you do, the alert sirens that go off like they did
Tornado
today?
sirens. Yeah,
for
this morning at 4:30 in the morning.
So how do you alert the public? How many people can you alert to keep them safe, right? So they definitely have an interest in this, and I'm imagining that Manny and all the guys up there at the FEMA office that take care of this kind of stuff are all in on seeing this legislation pass because we need time to figure out whatever the next thing is. If we can do it with GPS, something or other, and we inject something through the GPS system and all the farmers can put it in their tractors and it's in your car built in and mandated, like all of a sudden you have a realistic way, say, okay, we got this in the internet base and this comes straight from the satellite or GPS. Then you feel a little better about being able to do that kind of, the stuff that they're supposed to do, which is get this information to the public in a timely way.
Because probably like the main way that a disaster would happen that would necessitate a nationwide response is like EMPs, nuclear attacks. And I'm guessing in that situation, your cell phone, which 96% of people listen to the alert on, 95% of those probably wouldn't be working.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, that's one of those things that you can't test that really, like an EMP, but you look at all the things that have coily things in them and the things that would react to the EMP pulse in a bad way, and the infrastructure, that's a tough order to say that it'll survive that right now. And so AM radio with EMP protected equipment, which has built up and been tested over years of installations, that's a great way to say, hey, we can do this, but people have to go to AM. I mean, I bet you there's a ton of people who have a crank AM radio or some battery-powered AM radio in their house just in case. And that's a good answer too for now.
Not just preppers.
No, not just preppers.
Yeah. Yeah. Another question is, what about FM? Like, why is it AM? More people listen to FM, so why don't we do FM radio, not AM?
Well, the FM world is fed from this AM side also. So now you've got the same thing. You've got a bunch of FM stations. The question of which ones would survive an EMP, for instance. But whatever is on the air, the AM and FMs distribute, to each other. But it's through the AM stations that happens. So your first line is the AM stations with the EMP buildings, which are in stations like KMOX that cover a massive amount of area, and other stations around. They cover a lot of area just on their own. So you could always get an AM, figure out who you're going to tune to if there's a disaster. Most of the St. Louis area, if you go to KMOX, if there's a tornado coming or something coming, you kind of count on it. So KMOX, and you owners of people like KMOX stations like that, you keep your act together. So, right? That's what we need.
Lessons from bad.
If they let us down, we'll tune in and we'll hear some silly recorded show, and we'll all be disgusted. So.
Yep. And we're, our perspective is living in St. Louis, which is a large metro area. We have 12 or 14 big FM stations and a few big AMs, KMOX being the biggest. But I think another part of that is, and I alluded to that in the intro about there's a lot of rural customers who might not even be online.
Right.
Or they might be online like once a week on their
Yes.
dial-up modem. Like they weren't even counted in that survey.
Yeah.
So I know you had talked to a couple of people about this too, like the idea for like what is the solution that the CTA has for all those.
Right.
It's not just 1 million. There's more than a million.
Yeah.
Whether it's 2, whether it's 12, whether it's 10, whatever it is. What's your solution for alerting those people
Yeah,
too?
and as I go from St. Louis to the markets where we have stuff, the smaller marketplaces, and I got that 1.5, 2.5 hour of driving, I hit spots where my cell phone is dead, like it's gone. So we haven't filled those either. So there's another time thing, like the time it takes to fill those holes. Are they redundant enough? Is it part of the national structure of emergency alert? But I do get dead holes. So you're talking about farmland that's easy to get multiple AM stations to receive there. So the AM radio in that tractor or in his car, a guy out there can just tune across till he hears an AM station. And if the national alert has been tripped for something like an attack, we talked about, that would be on all the stations. Doesn't matter what station it was. If you tune across your AM radio, you should get that same thing. Same thing would be on FM at that point. But the FM stations
Don't have as wide of
may
coverage,
not be
though.
there. It's like.
Well, what do you think about all this? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you soon.